So the Warriors were defeated yesterday by the Lakers in game 6. And I'll tell you this, it was tough to watch. So I'm assuming that for the players, it was even tougher to play in, at least on the Warriors side. The Lakers were doing just fine. And so looking at this game, there's a lot that could be done differently. But I think the thing to talk a lot about is what happens next. So just to rewind a little bit, early on, the Lakers got up to a 27-10 lead. That was huge. It seemed like the Lakers were just having their way. They were doing whatever they wanted to do. They were playing with poise. They had a good rhythm. And on the other side, it was just sort of like disaster struck. Nothing the Warriors were doing seemed to be working. Their shots just weren't going in. They had offensive rebounds, kick it over to an open guy. It still doesn't go in. Steph was cold. And so I remember watching this and seeing that lead and saying, this doesn't look too good. I will say, to their credit, they did cut the lead down to, I think, 5 around the end of the quarter, but they never were able to get ahead of that sort of hump. They were never able to get ahead of the Lakers and have an answer for the onslaught. Steph still did finish with 32 points, but it wasn't a great shooting night for him. What stood out to me, though, was only Steph and DiVincenzo actually had double digits. So Steph had the 32, DiVincenzo had 16, I believe. And so when you're looking at that, it's like, of course you're not going to win. So not only were the Lakers playing, I would give them very well, the Warriors just weren't playing good at all. And so this glaring loss is one that I think is going to continue to hurt for a really long time. And I think the question now is like, what is going to happen next season? So there's a long offseason. Steph, Draymond, Clay, in all of their sort of post-game interviews, they alluded to the fact that they sort of didn't know what to do with themselves because they're usually never off in May. And even Steve Kerr was pretty frank in his assessment. And, he can be quoted as saying this is not a championship team, and it never was. And so for next season, the Warriors are going to have to take a real hard look at themselves to figure out what are we going to do differently. A few things come to mind for me, and, I'd love to hear your thoughts on what you think the Warriors should be doing. But one big thing, defense. So the Warriors typically are just like an offensive killer. You give them an inch, they'll take a mile. You give them 2 minutes, next thing you know, they're up by 10, 12 points. And that is deadly. That means that you have to cover every single person on the floor because anyone can take a shot. The big thing that the Warriors have to figure out is defense. In the moments where we just go cold as a team, how do we stop the bleeding? How do we just coast until someone starts to get hot? And if you can do that, then you could still win games. I alluded to this earlier, but the depth is a really big challenge here. Darvin Ham was pretty honest about their game plan for what they were thinking about going into this. He said, we wanted their key shooters to defend multiple plays and actions. We wanted to make sure that they tired their legs out. And so when you have folks who are going to really be hounding Steph, hounding Clay, hounding Poole, then you're in a scenario where typically you're going to be looking for other folks who can make a shot of their own, who can get open, who can create some play, who can drive to the basket. And we didn't really see that on this team. Some of it, of course, could be, who plays were drawn up for and whatnot, what plays they had already gone over. But that depth is something that needs to be figured out, whether it's changing up players or whether it's just being more creative in terms of how they're coaching and how they're thinking through plays. But when you have folks that aren't shooting as well as you would like, that you kind of expect to, then that depth is what's going to come. And so for the Lakers even, you had Reeves going off, you had Russell going off, you had Walker going off, you had Schroeder going off before he was ejected. So there's so many folks that were just able to get hot where it took a lot of the pressure off of AD and LeBron. The other thing, and this is to me the toughest one, which is confidence. So basketball is such a mental sport. And to be fair, I am not some world-renowned basketball player. You couldn't tell. You know, I think facing an elimination game and an extremely loud crowd at the Lakers, I think a lot of folks lost confidence in themselves and their shots, and I think some of it could have also been taken from the past games that they had where, you know, shots just weren't falling, and it just sort of became an avalanche from there, which is really tough. It's really tough. And so even what was happening in the series, I mean, they were like 1-6 or something like that, and just continuously like weren't making shots. And so there's something like mentally to work on as a team with your confidence. What do you do when nothing is going in, when nothing is working? I mean, it was like they couldn't buy a shot to go in at that moment, which was really tough to watch. And and especially as a player, I'm sure they know that they can do better. They know that some shots should go in. They know that they had good looks. There were 2 times I noticed during the game where Clay missed a 3-pointer, was able to get it back, shot again, and still missed. And so that, I think, could really just be debilitating to your confidence, to how you're approaching the game. You know, you're likely second guessing shots that you would just normally take without thought. You're trying to correct your form. You're trying to get the best shot. And I think around the entire team, that started to permeate throughout the team, where folks are now all sort of like rethinking, you know, should I take the shot? Should I not? And it just kind of created, I think, a stale offense. And so the 3 big things they have to focus on is defense, depth, and confidence. I think they'll figure out, you know, the defense. I think they'll figure out things for depth. The confidence, I'm just not really sure, but I'm not sure that the Warriors have really been in those situations where nothing seems to be working because they've been riding this high of championship basketball. But this summer and this offseason will be a great opportunity for them to really dig deep within themselves. And I'm really excited to see how they come back. And I'm really excited